All right, so how to improve your overall physical health. And the saying is really true, is that health is wealth. Because if you have all the money in the world and you're unhealthy, you can't enjoy life. And so I really hold, my physical health in a super high regard. I think it's really important, and it does increase the overall quality of life. And that's what it's all about. So, the good thing is that the body is extremely resilient, and the body can repair and heal and come back from even, some of the most horrible health conditions. So we already know that. And so the thing to do is to ask, why are people so unhealthy? That's the question, because we really want to, we want to get the awareness about the issue and then get to the truth of it. And for physical health, from my understanding, is that, it really boils down to the choices you make and how you interact with, certain things that your body comes into contact throughout your daily life. Because what is seemingly happening is that incrementally, as people come in contact with different, products and chemicals and different things that they put on their skin, cleaning products or food, that's having adverse effects on their physical health. And so I really like, the concept of natural living. And when you think about natural living, yeah, it's like some guy in Birkenstocks with like a man bun and, like a hemp pants and a hemp shirt with like a little beard, eating granola. And yeah, that's kind of the like physical embodiment of natural living. But natural living really is just how people have lived for thousands of years, kind of pre-industrial revolution. And so, really what changed with, the food, the body care products, and the cleaning products that people use daily and interact with is, it was advancements in, chemical engineering, technologies based upon chemistry that kind of, were birthed, out of the Industrial Revolution period, and then were, just developed and grew. And, what ended up happening was, with the advancements in these technologies, they allowed for, say for example, in food production, with the development of chemical fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides, it allowed for more crop production, increased food production, and it increased availability and, storage, distribution, all these different things. It really helped feed more people, which is good. But, there's adverse effects to this. And really it boils down to it's the chemicals. It's the chemicals that are in the different products. And, the three main things that we interact with are the foods that we eat, the body care products that we put on our skin and on our body, and the cleaning products. And obviously there's like medical things, but those are like the three main ones. And so you can really trace people's health and deterioration in health to these chemicals being put in all these products. And, a lot of these chemicals are byproducts from weapons manufacturing. So, for example, so you have like a company like DuPont, and, they're a big manufacturer of household, cleaning products that we're all familiar with. And they're also a weapons manufacturer. They manufacture chemical weapons for the government. So there's a huge crossover in those industries. And really what ended up happening was, World War I and World War II, and this is in the United States, and, I don't know how it is in Europe and in other places, but I'm speaking from my experience in the States. There was this huge stockpile of chemicals, and marketers and advertisers were tasked with the order of, we need to incorporate these chemicals into products that we can sell to the general public, to make money and get these things gone. And that's what happened. Was you went from a transition from more natural organic based products to now a lot of these chemically based products. And fast forward now to 2026, the fallout of people's physical health is like insane, and it's a national health crisis. And you think that you can turn to doctors and the healthcare industry for help with all of this, and my experience with all of that, it's like they don't know their ass from their elbow. Like I just recently busted my finger on a logging job, and I go to get an x-ray, and these two x-ray technicians, bring in like the little x-ray machine, and they were huge. They could barely walk, and they're younger than me. They're like in their 20s. And I was like, oh my God, you guys are, they're working at a hospital that's supposed to care for people, and these people are like 300 pounds. And I mean, that was like shocking. I was like, forget my finger, like you need help. But whatever. They have no idea. And so that's the other alarming thing about all of this is, all of this is shrouded in mystery, and it's not general knowledge to the public. And so it's, everyone knows that everyone's health is in decline. But what ends up happening is the medical industries, pharmaceutical, doctors, all these people, they've really compartmentalized, symptoms of all of these, problems. The goal is to not get to the root and solve the problem. The goal is to treat the symptoms. And so that's why you see, so many advertisements on television for all these different pharmaceutical products for like skin disorders, and a huge one with people are, like digestion and stomach disorders, where they're taking medication because, like they can't control going to the bathroom, or they have like extreme acid reflux and all these things. And, no one really asks the question of, well, number one is, why is this happening, and what is the root cause of all of this? And is this a problem that we can solve? And it absolutely is. And, like I said, it takes awareness and getting to the truth. And so that, as someone, who wants awareness and to really understand situations, is you have to begin, researching and learning and getting the knowledge and taking the information in for yourself, and then reasoning it out to yourself and really trying to understand. So, I like to use logic, reasoning, and critical thinking to really start understanding issues for myself, because it's only going to make sense if it makes sense to you. You can hear other people like myself talk and give advice and information, but you're only going to understand it if you can take it in for yourself and then start, doing some action-oriented implementation to really see the results. So, the key point here is embrace natural living and begin to understand and kind of learn about these different chemicals. So, let's just take food for an example. The importance of eating organic fruits and vegetables. So the whole thing with food production is that, at the stop sign, sorry. The whole thing with food production is, if it's not grown organically, there's first of all, chemical fertilizers that go into giving the plant nutrients. And, while in the chemical process, the plant is turning it is utilizing soluble, nutrients to grow and produce fruit. The big thing with the chemical fertilizers is how it affects the soil and the overall plant health. And while there's probably trace amounts of chemical fertilizers in fruits and vegetables, and that does cause damage, so it's something to be aware of. But the big thing with fruits and vegetables that aren't grown organically are the pesticides and the herbicides, because those are applied directly to the plant. And when you think about it and you begin to learn and understand, the food is soaked in herbicide and pesticide, like gallons and millions of gallons of this stuff goes on our food every year. And there's a great resource that I'm going to include a link in the description, and it's a company called Environmental Working Group, and they have guides, and there's 3 guides, and they're super informative and very helpful. One is safe fruits and vegetables to consume, and then the other one is body care products that are safe to put on your body, and then the other one is household cleaning products. So, this group is a nonprofit that's solely dedicated to, providing information and improving people's physical health. So they've done a lot of time and research into this, and that's why I kind of identified those 3 main groups. So not all conventionally grown, non-organic food is full of chemical pesticides and herbicides. And so the Environmental Working Group's list, I think they call it the Dirty Dozen. You can read their list, and there's things like avocados that, they don't require really any herbicides and pesticides to produce them. So, it's okay to eat some conventionally grown avocados. Trying to think what else is on there. Anyway, just take a look at the list and you'll see. And the big problem with organic produce and organic food is that it's so expensive. And I'll do more videos on how to eat healthy and organically without breaking the bank, because it can be done. You just have to know what to look for, and then really you have to develop the skill of cooking. That's the big thing with that, and start preparing everything fresh. So, the other thing to look out for, so you have the production of the food where all the chemicals are going into producing it, but then you have the production of these food products. And a good thing to keep in mind is, you have the food in its whole form, and the farther you get from the whole form of the food, the more chemicals and preservatives and dyes and all these different chemicals that go into creating this product, they're going to be more concentrated, and that food is going to be more toxic to your body. So, I try to gravitate towards eating as many whole foods as possible, and that goes for meat and bread and dairy. Obviously, bread and dairy are processed foods, but they're minimally processed, and fruits and vegetables and grains and all these things. So that's a good rule of thumb. The further you get away from the whole form of the food, the harder it's going to be for your body, and then the more chemicals is required, to keep it stable so it doesn't go off and rot. And so that's a big thing, is to start understanding the preservatives that go into food. And you can begin to, the big thing is just like reading the ingredients, because everything has to be labeled. And you begin to see I really like, shrimp. I buy frozen shrimp, but it's really hard to find shrimp that isn't full of preservatives to keep it fresh. But luckily, I have, where I live, there are sources for clean meat and seafood and stuff like that, and I've been able to find one it's just raw, frozen, wild shrimp from Mexico. So the stuff is out there, and you kind of have to become a detective with all this, and take control for yourself, so you can start finding the foods that, number one, you like to eat, and that aren't, fully saturated with pesticides and preservatives. So, the food is a huge part of a natural lifestyle. And then next is going to be whatever you put on your body, body care products. So it's going to be soaps and shampoos and lotions and, perfumes and body mists and, all the stuff that people put on their body. And it's the same thing. It's, a lot of those products are full of chemicals that help keep them shelf stable. And, a lot of the really higher quality body care products, some require refrigeration, others not. There's really good companies Like for soap, I really like Dr. Bronner's. It's a really simple recipe. There's not a lot of ingredients, and it's, shelf stable, and it's effective. People have been using natural soap for a long, long time, and this is a natural soap recipe, and it's very popular and it's very accessible. I know my wife really likes the skincare company called Eminence. That's a really high quality skincare, body care product line out of Belgium. And yeah, it's expensive, but the thing to consider is all of this is an investment. It costs more money to eat healthy food, choose natural body care products. But all this is an investment in your health and an investment in the future. And so you can keep that in mind with having to set extra money aside to afford these kinds of things. So, shampoos are the same. Think about those, look at the ingredients, and then, this is more popular, and people are waking up to all this and choosing a natural lifestyle. So, stores like Walmart, like we were looking for a natural sunscreen for our daughter, and we were in Walmart, and yeah, there were actually several choices for natural sunscreens in Walmart, which is good. And of course, we read the ingredients, and we're familiar with the preservatives and the chemicals and all the toxic products to avoid. So you can, if you're not familiar with a brand, you can just read the ingredients and you'll know. So then the other thing are, the cleaning products. And, I feel like they're overlooked because it's so easy just to grab a bottle of spray and, spray down your counters or say like dish soap that you wash your dishes with. It's really easy to just get in the habit of buying those products and applying them consistently to the surfaces that your food and your skin is going to be interacting with, and even your respiration system. As you're breathing these things in, because they're they're mists and they're sprays and they're aerosols, and so they're in the air and you're breathing these things in. And these have adverse effects. These are like really strong chemicals, and this is where it's the military industrial complex, weapons manufacturing. It's the phosphates that they're using in chemical weapons to kill people are the same phosphates in like your laundry detergent. And you see a lot of people, like a friend of mine, he had like autoimmune issues and he'd get really bad hives, and it is from the laundry detergent that he was using, and it was leaving chemicals in the cloth, and then he'd put it on a shirt, and then his body would react to that. So it's really important to choose natural cleaning products, and there's a great company, Seventh Generation. We use their products a lot. They're widely available. They have laundry detergent, dish soap, household cleaning products like sprays, to clean your counters and clean your floors, and cleaning your bathroom as well. And you can even make your own. People have been doing that for a long time. So, those are the things to be aware of with the food and the body care and the household cleaning products. But, let's say you've been interacting with these products most of your life and you're in a compromised state. And how do you begin to, come out of this? If you're experiencing autoimmune issues or, even worse illnesses, like I said, the body can heal. And, the thing is that you got to understand getting to the root of the problem and start taking control of your own health. And you can use medical professionals for advice and knowledge and information. But the important thing is to really take control of your own health. And it's really empowering. And you can then start making informed decisions on your own. And there are good doctors out there. A lot can be learned from just like a real simple blood test that can tell you, if you have deficiencies in your body, concentrations of different things. And so you can find a good doctor, like a naturopath. Those are seem to be doctors who are more into natural living. And even, there's medical doctors that are tuned into all of this. So you start learning, you start taking control, And it's really all about clean living and the natural lifestyle. And over time, your body will begin to eliminate all of these chemicals and all the residue that you've accumulated over your life. And there's things you can do, cleanses you can do. You can do eat like a raw food diet for a month. Fruits, vegetables, and salads that'll really help clean out your body. You can do enemas; those are really good. Coffee enemas. Look into the Gerson therapy. I'll leave a link to the Gerson therapy book in the description. It's really helpful, for ridding the body of all these chemicals and toxins that build up. And it takes time, but the body can bounce back. And if you're really adamant about a natural lifestyle, clean eating, clean living, and you're willing to make the investment, it pays off in dividends, because a year later you're feeling great and you're really able to have a higher quality of life. And that's what it's all about. And you get to the point where you're familiar with all the things to avoid, because it doesn't really change. They're using the same products, and you just get familiar with a little bit over time, and it becomes easier. So that's you don't have to feel like you have to figure everything out at once. It just takes time, and eventually you'll be there, and you'll know exactly what to avoid, and you'll know the brands that you trust, and you can begin implementing subtle changes incrementally. To then, before you know it, you wake up one day and you're fully living a natural lifestyle, and you're really pursuing healthy living, and you're building your physical wealth and your physical health. So this is kind of just the beginning. I'm going to be sharing more videos about this and diving into it deeper. But anyway, I wanted to just give you a brief overview and some stuff to chew on, think about, and start researching and learning for yourself. Anyway, I appreciate your time. Have a good one.